Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Wilson. I'm with a company called Convergence Coaching, and I'm here to stream live with my good friend and colleague, Emily Brantz. Hey, Emily.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. We're doing a live stream segment called HR Huddle. We stream live at Convergence every Monday at 4:15 Central, 5:15 Eastern, and talk about all matters related to talent. And normally our HR Huddle owner, Tamara Lorzell, is with us, but today she is out facilitating. And so Emily and I are here to talk to you all and with you all about kind of a follow-up on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I initiatives, and just sort of the latest things we've been talking about with firms or that we've been hearing about. So this isn't, it's sort of a potpourri of subjects, if you will, not a specific angle per se, but we've just had a number of different kind of conversations about DE&I, and I guess I'll just start with the big picture, and that is, firms are completing their tax filing deadlines, at least the federal deadlines today. Congratulations, by the way, for those that are, finally getting to the end of that. And yet there are still other deadlines looming around, but mostly fall busy season is starting to ebb. And as it ebbs, then we enter this tiny, precious, proactive period of time between now and, let's say, the middle of January or the end of January, where firm leaders and HR professionals, talent folks, can say, what could we get accomplished? Where can we move the needle? How can we plant seeds for the future during this time when we can get leadership's attention? You're going to be possibly participating in firm retreats or other meetings, and we just wanted to make sure that you have DE&I on your radar, and from two angles at least. And I'll say these two angles, and then Emily, you can jump in here and embellish this idea. But one angle is, we just saw some industry benchmark studies for 2022 that look at 21 financial numbers, and we saw that turnover, which has been traditionally sitting around 13%, people leaving each year, jumped to 19% for certain classes of firms, and not the biggest firms. It's much higher than for the larger firms in this country in most cases. And so, bleeding out 19%, a fifth of your workforce. You've got a 5-person team, one of them is going to leave in the next year. That's horrible, So the cost of turnover is so high. And why do people leave? For lots of reasons, but one of the big ones is they don't feel like they belong. Mm-hmm. And so that sense of belonging is important. And we can't afford to bleed people out. So that's one angle. And the other angle is, we've got to pay attention to DE&I because it opens up an entire world of possibilities from a recruiting perspective and from a team expansion perspective. It just to think differently about the kind of people that we go out and go after and bring into our teams, and how that changes the way we run our firms. It changes our teams, all for the better. That increased diversity, all for the better. So those are the two angles that we think DE&I will benefit you in the short run, and why you should put it up on your dashboard for things to talk about and plan for the rest of this year and into 23.
Definitely, Jen, that belonging is that inclusion, that I in DEI. Is how you're going to not just invite them to the table to be there, but to actually get them involved and eat at the table and bring their dish and really enjoy the conversation instead of just sitting there or feeling like they're at the kids' table, maybe a little bit. It's interesting that you said, that it opens up the doors, that remote does. It's gone is the excuse of there's no one in our town or in our region or in our area that comes from a diverse background or a different ethnicity or a different religion or LGBTQ plus. There's not an excuse anymore. And we also have to think about it too, is our client base is just as diverse as our talent. If you need that business case, your clients are also diverse. Our entire country, the world, is becoming more diverse. I think we have some statistics out there and stuff that we're graying and we're no longer white. We're turning more female out there as we are, as the years go on, I guess is how we should say it. So you can't just sit in this little bubble anymore and use that excuse or have that mindset either that this is all that's out there. It's not how it is anymore. Our world is open, our world is bigger with technology, and that wasn't just the pandemic that brought that on either. Technology has been around for a long time. It's just what propelled it forward and into the forefront for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and so you bring up a good point about like no more excuses. If I live in a community or our business is based in a community where we don't have a lot of diverse candidates at the universities or colleges that we recruit at, that's a common objection. Well, how about we shift which colleges and universities we recruit at then? We get to choose that. And if there aren't any diverse ones in our locality, then we can start recruiting from more diverse universities, colleges, community colleges outside of our locality, and recognize that we'll either need to try to attract these candidates to come live where our office is, which we wouldn't recommend because we don't, it's very difficult to recruit people to relocate and have them be happy, especially if they're not going to be well represented in your locality. But instead, just to have them be a remote employee and have them participate in a remote and blended fashion in your workflow, and really embrace remote work as a strategy to open those doors to a diverse workforce. And that's where Emily's coming from with this no more excuses. It's saying our geography doesn't support it is out of touch or something. It's like an old school traditionalist type of objection, and we can't hear it very well anymore. And so we really have to embrace thinking outside the box for the way that we're managing talent, and look for representation inside our organization, and really stop and say, what is the male female ratio? In many firms, if we ask that question, they'll we get like inexact. It feels like we've got a lot of women, and well, you should know these statistics, folks. These are labor demographics, and we should know them. And how many men and women do we have at which level? What is our representation in terms of ethnicity, and at each level, and what does Emily use the kids table? What does the parents table look like? The partners. And both equity and non-equity partners. I like to look at both of those statistics. A lot of firms like to toss around a big ratio of diversity for their partner group, but then I'll dig in and say, how many of these people that are in underrepresented categories have equity in the business? And that sometimes opens up a can of worms, if you will. So those are all things to be paying attention to and to keep statistics. And if you really wanted to get serious about DE&I, you don't just keep the statistics, you set goals for changing them, and you report against those goals transparently to the entire firm. Now, I know some of you serve clients, and especially in the nonprofit space, but government space too, and other progressive clients who would say, hey, in order for you to win this work, you have to demonstrate diversity. We don't want to do business with you if you're not diverse. And so for those clients, we know you're way down the path of tracking and reporting and paying attention and growing and expanding your diversity. But otherwise, there's many, many firms out there who don't have that happening yet. And boy, we need to.
That's right. That's right. We do. And you also have to look at it too. And this is something that's been talked about in a lot of these DEI roundtables that I've been participating in, Jen. And I'm just going to toss it to you and see how you can deal with it. So putting you on the spot. But one of the things that a lot of firms are actually struggling with is how do you get people to, how are you asking them to, divulge what they're, if they're in one of the minorities or their ethnicity or LGBTQ plus or, any of that kind of stuff, sometimes you can't see it, right?
Oh, no,
It's not
of
just in the
course.
front. So
Yes.
they're struggling with how do we keep, without, surprising someone, forcing them to do it, that it's
Oh,
that
no.
voluntary, it's voluntary, like, this is what who I am, bringing
Yeah,
that
well,
whole self to it.
exactly. That's where I was just going to go, is that you have to have a culture that accepts and encourages and embraces and loves people for their whole self, and that they feel like they can bring their whole self to work, and that they don't have to hide any piece of themselves. And that's not something where you just put out a campaign that says, bring your whole self to work and tell us everything, because nobody trusts that really at first. It's something that's demonstrated over time. So, I'm not a big fan of the census, if you will, but you can certainly do a census. That's an option. I don't think you'll get full transparency. I think you could have, open up committee work, and people that are on the committee will in fact begin their and that participate in initiatives for the DE&I group. They'll start telling their story. It's a little bit like, I belong to a church I have since forever, and when we're trying to drive some kind of change, we form a committee, and then the people on that committee tend to speak, then go to the podium and speak and say, here's my story and here's why I think we should change it, or whatever it is. And so I think we will begin to demonstrate the trust of the culture by having people that are confident disclosing their difference or distinctions. And then people will begin to feel like they could be themselves and say their truth. You're never going to force people to say those things. We don't have to force people. But the other thing is, if we have a serious initiative about it and we talk about statistics and we say, we care about these numbers and we will be growing this. And, most of us want more people like us in the workplace, whatever we perceive our us to be, like if I'm a fully remote worker, for instance, I want more remote workers because I feel vulnerable out here all by myself. And if I'm a person of color, of course, I want other people of color. And I also want to see some people of color represented at the leadership table, so maybe I will feel more comfortable speaking up as I see that the organization is really serious about the initiatives and not just statistically interested, but really, truly interested in driving diversity of thought, diversity of view, diversity of client, all those things that can be so fantastic when we get a diverse team together.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think AIM a couple months ago did a study about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they were talking about at the top level, if they're seeing that diversity or hearing that leadership is behind DEI initiatives, it's more likely it's going to stick and trickle down. And one strategy that these firms that are really increasing their DEI and really out on the forefront, I would say, is their leadership team is coming out and saying how they themselves are diverse and sharing their stories. And it's not necessarily everybody in the team knew that story. No, like a bunch of people didn't, and they had just assumed everybody knew that story. And so it was interesting that they were then, here's my story, saying how it's okay to be diverse and how I got here and the struggles I faced, and sharing that real part of themselves that increased everybody else underneath them to start sharing their own stories and bringing people along. It was an amazing aha moment that I think everybody really got out of that.
I love that, Emily. And I love it because it's just like the fundamentals that all of us in talent know, which is, the big dog eats the dog food first, or whatever you want to say. If the top leaders don't walk the walk and talk the talk, if they don't demonstrate their commitment, but also to bring their whole self and authentically bring their whole self. And, I think that if we do that and we really commit strategically, and we communicate transparently and regularly, and this doesn't feel like the initiative of the moment or a desperation initiative, a recruiting initiative, or marketing initiative where we're like trying to diverse up our website or something, instead of diverse up our team and the way we think and the way we approach our work. And, anyway, I just think all of those things have to happen. And it's not enough to just say it. There's so much that needs to be done. And I worry as I think about what's coming up here in the next, 4 or 5 months, firms could really make a little bit of progress here. You could be like, wow, we have so much to do. We'll do this next May. Oh, please, do something, something in this area. And some firms are stopping and they're really getting unconscious bias training. And they're stopping and saying, wow, here are all the ways that we each have bias and how it runs us subliminally, and how we have to really begin to recognize our biases and share them transparently. That's part of a leader story too, is to say, here are the places I have bias, and which is scary, but honest. And so that's another idea, possibly. The other thing that's happening about this time of the year, and that you might want to talk a little bit about, is, we're rolling into 2023 calendar creation for a lot of departments. And HR is having to figure out, what holidays and, what are we going to recommend? And boy, this is impacting DE&I. I mean, we need to be thinking about that calendar differently than we have in the past. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different approaches out there. Some are doing floating holidays. So if you want to take off a certain day that's not on the normal calendar, like for instance, some places haven't added in Juneteenth yet into their calendar as a day that they have off. So if you would like to take Juneteenth Day, you can use your floating holiday to take Juneteenth Day off. Or there are a lot of Jewish holidays as well. That's one we see a lot too. However, I have seen some strategy a little bit emerge besides the floating holidays, and that is to recognize any day that is a federal holiday, that day is automatically off. Like that day, everybody gets it off, ranging from Indigenous Peoples Day or Columbus Day to MLK Day, Christmas, that kind of stuff. But it does still leave several holidays out. And so my suggestion would be go ahead and do the federal holiday, but work in some floating holidays. If you don't have that census yet, work some out, just have them out there for people. If you do have some census, you might want to start looking at, okay, we need to have X amount of days, for those floating holidays. And that could help you determine how many floating holidays, because there are a lot of different, for instance, like the Jewish faith, there's a lot of different ones that don't coincide with the Christian, like Presbyterian, which holidays, it doesn't quite fit into that same tradition. And so really take that into account when you are looking at holiday, if you're having a holiday event as well, like don't make sure when, like all the different there's so many different holidays.
All of these. There's such assumptions that happen.
Exactly.
Now, some firms are really attuned to it and making sure that they are not just whoever the person making the decision, the holidays that they honor. That's what we're following, or the founders' holidays or something. I mean, we have to keep evolving that process big time. And it does probably lead to an expansion of the number of days off, which, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but people are pretty overwhelmed and burnt out these days. And I don't think it would be met with a lot of resistance from your team if they get some extra holidays. And I know you could say, gosh, just fewer work days, but we're living in such an anytime, anywhere work environment anyway. People will get their work done and meet their filing deadlines. Honoring the days that are important to them, and really making sure they get an opportunity to celebrate, each of our people in ways that are meaningful to them with their families, and and to really reflect on dates that are important to them, not just dates that are important to white America or white Christian America or something, which is not diverse
Right.
in our approach. So I love that, and I love the idea. Now, you were saying something to me recently. Does that end up with 11? Is all the federal holidays 11?
I think it was 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, 11 federal holidays that are out there, with the addition of Juneteenth, which just was that last year? I think it was in 2021 was the first year that it was celebrating. And
then, where could I find this calendar if I was listening?
So Caroline, if you can share the federal, if you just search federal holidays 2023, they have all of them listed out all the way into 2030. And so I'll have Caroline show that. I'd also recommend that you look at the AICPA diversity calendar. There's the 2022 one out there, and that's going to go from ranging from like, there's International Women's Day on there, Women's Equality Day, LGBTQ History Month, Native American Heritage Month, and let's not also forget Veterans Day is also out there, and that's one that is considered part of your DEI strategy. So again, another reason for you to really be one size fits one, even with your holidays, to make sure everybody's included in what's special and important to themselves and their family.
I love that, Em. And I love the opportunity to, get with you and get caught up on the latest with DE&I. Emily is the chairperson of our DE&I committee at Convergence, and she's very busy, trying to study these trends out there in the marketplace and meet with people and hear from firms that are, making progress and figuring out what's stopping progress too. So thank you, Emily, so much for coming today to be with us at HR Huddle, and we'll be back next week at this same 5:15 Eastern next Monday. So join us on the 24th for another HR Huddle. Thanks everybody for joining today.
Thank you.